Donald Trump just became the 47th president of the United States after being the 45th president of the United States, and this was an outcome I have been predicting since July of 2024. You might be wondering why I was so confident that Donald Trump was going to win the election this year, and the truth is that it ties back to three important intelligence tools that he's been using in his campaign since the beginning, and those are three tools I'm going to share with you today. The first and most important of the influence skills that the Trump campaign was using that the Harris campaign was getting wrong was simple messaging. Simple messaging goes a long way when you're trying to build influence because influence is something that happens over time. And if you use complex words and complex messages and complex ideas, people don't remember that long term. And if people can't remember something long term, then you are not actually building any influence. So what you saw over and over again was Donald Trump sticking to very simple, very basic ideas. Ideas like the common person, ideas like small business, ideas like the border and securing the borders. You kept seeing Donald Trump hit back on these same basic, simple ideas over and over again, and it made it so that his very simple message could turn into very powerful influence over time, so powerful in fact that it swayed many of the blue states to vote red this election. The most powerful example of exactly how simple Donald Trump's campaign marketing message really was when you think about the campaign slogans for both Harris and Trump. Trump had a very famous, very simple slogan that we all know very well. Make America Great Again. That's the MAGA hat. That's the red, bold hat that you see him wearing all the time. The real question is, what was the Harris campaign slogan? Do you know? Most people don't. She actually had a slogan that was a new way forward. In fact, her slogan changed and morphed over time, ultimately landing on a new way forward, which is funny because that's a complex idea that we don't really understand, where Make America Great Again is a very simple idea that everyone understands. The second influence tool that the Trump campaign used very well, that the Harris campaign failed to use well, was an idea of non-alienation. This is funny, especially if you consider the fact that Trump had such a strong stance on border security and keeping illegal aliens out. In the intelligence world, non-alienation means that you do not set up barriers that separate you from the people that you're trying to influence, and vice versa. You don't create ways that make other people feel like they are disconnected from you. Now, what happened in this year's election cycle is that the Harris campaign leaned very heavily into the fact that she was a woman, the fact that she was a woman of color, the fact that she had both South Asian descent and African American descent. What that did is it alienated all the voters who were not women, who were not African American, and who were not South Asian. So in their very effort to try to highlight her diversity and inclusive message, what they actually did was they alienated voters who did not fall into those three categories. And you could see that in the popular vote, and you can see that in the massive change in the electoral college votes that went and sided with the Trump campaign. Key battleground states with large populations that were Latino, East Asian, or even Middle Eastern sided with Trump in the 2024 election, and that fact goes to show exactly how much alienation the Harris camp created by focusing on her gender and her ethnicity instead of embracing the fact that voters come from all ethnicities, all races, and all colors. In a funny twist, the third influence tool that helped secure the 2024 election for Donald Trump didn't actually originate from the Donald Trump campaign at all. That third influence tool is something that we call the relevancy principle. The relevancy principle dictates that whatever you hear over and over again is something your brain will identify as relevant to you. And if you recall, influence is something that only happens over the long term. So when a topic becomes very relevant, it has long-term lasting impact. And that long-term lasting impact means that it has long-term influence. Now here, all you have to do is look at the advertising dollars spent on the 2024 campaign. The Democrats outspent the Republicans by almost $1 billion. Let me say that again because it's important. The Democrats spent almost $1 billion more than the Republicans in their advertising campaigns. And what was it that made up those advertising campaigns? Inside of the Donald Trump campaign ads, what you saw was Trump primarily focusing on Trump, on promoting his very simple messaging and his very simple ideas that he knew would resonate with all Americans despite their race, their color, their age, or their gender. On the other side of the fence, the Democrats actually spent a great deal of their advertising also talking about Trump. So here you had a Kamala Harris ad that was talking about Trump and talking about how dangerous Trump was and talking about how he was a criminal and talking about Trump and all the things that he had done wrong. Now, according to the relevancy principle, what that meant was that anyone watching television would see Trump ads about Trump, making him relevant, and they would see Harris ads talking about Trump, making Trump relevant. So over and over again, what was really happening is the Trump campaign was getting twice as much attention because the Democrats were spending nearly $1 billion more talking about Donald Trump rather than talking about Kamala Harris with simple messages that would build long-term influence. When you combine these three influence tools together, the simple messaging, the non-alienation, and the relevancy principle, it's very clear to see why Donald Trump was clearly going to be the victor this year and why I was able to make that prediction in July on some of the biggest podcasts in the world. Because in July, immediately following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania, you could see him double down on the very effective use of all three of these tools: simple messaging, non-alienation, and the relevancy principle. And that was simply something that the Biden camp, which then turned into the Harris camp, could never figure out. And as a result of that, we are now looking at the 47th president of the United States, President Donald Trump. Congratulations to the president. Congratulations to the United States on their new president. And if you want to learn more about how to think like I think and see the world through the eyes of a spy, go ahead and click on the link in the description below. Take care.